Hello, welcome to the July 18th, 2023 Club Cubase livestream. My name is Greg Undo and I'm hosting the livestream today. And if you have not attended a livestream before, how it works is you can simply ask questions in the live chat field, or you can send questions in advance by emailing clubcubase@steinberg.de. When asking questions, realize that my ability to answer questions in kind of a real-time format may soon be eclipsed as time goes on. I'll try my best to go through them chronologically. So if you don't see an immediate response to your question, if we could avoid asking the same questions over and over again, that would be great. If for some reason I do lose some questions in the chat, which happens once in a while, I'll let you know, and you could feel free to re-ask questions again. And I'll let you know when that happens. When asking questions, if you could specify which version of Cubase that you're running, whether it's Cubase LE, AI, Elements, Artist, or Pro, which version number, if it's version 11 or 12 or earlier, also which operating system that you're using. So if you're running on a Mac or Windows, that information is always really helpful to know. Let me just clear my throat. Excuse me. All right. And also, when asking questions, we should have a list of all the topics that are covered in today's live stream pinned to the top of the comments field with timestamps. So you could quickly navigate to different parts of the live stream and find specific answers to questions. And if you wanted to search for topics that have been covered in previous live streams, you could go to cubaseindex.com. And we want to thank Jan from Stockholm for creating that website. It's an incredibly useful tool, and I think it's almost approaching 28,000 questions that we've addressed since we kind of ramped up the live streams during COVID. We also want to give special thanks to Jazz Dude and to Agent K, who serve as moderators. They're not Steinberg employees. They just want to make it a more pleasant community and experience for people. So we want to give special thanks to them. We also want to give another special kudos to Jazz Dude for his work with the Cubase Nation Discord, and it's a wonderful resource of information for the Steinberg community. Do have different tutorials, articles, and just kind of a great compendium of information. So thanks to Jazz Dude for his work there. We also want to give a special thanks to Timothy, I think his last name is Okiki, who created and offered the new Club Cubase thumbnail. So if you like that, I thought it was very great and ran it through the Steinberg marketing department, and they thought it was wonderful as well, so we're going to be using that from now on. So we appreciate your generous gift of the thumbnail. It looks great. All right, so once again, my name is Greg Undo. I work for Yamaha Corporation of America, and I primarily focus on Steinberg products. And I'm the host of the live stream, and I work, in the United States. Yamaha Corporation of America is the United States distributor for Steinberg. And I'm presenting from outside of outside Washington, D.C. area in Alexandria, Virginia. And if you're watching this live, please feel free to jump in, introduce yourself, and tell us where you're from, and we'll go ahead and start answering some questions. All right, wonderful to see you, Jazz Dude. And we also have Benny and Stefan, both from Sweden. All right, so we see Dallas LaRue just says, is there any plugin in Cubase that could be considered AI in any way? Maybe not plugins per se. There's some AI functionality in Backbone that's not included with Cubase, where it could kind of using AI artificially come up with like different kick drum sounds. One of the functions that comes with Cubase is Spectral Layers 1, so the algorithms for extracting vocals, that could be considered AI. There's lots of other functions that may be not tied to particular plugins, such as being able to have like the automatic harmony generation. That would probably be deemed AI. like in the chord track, being able to suggest particular chords, to do scale editing. So I think that those particular things could be considered AI. But it could really depend on kind of what your terminology, and those aren't necessarily plugins, but kind of parts of the particular program. Probably even stuff like, being able to take a MIDI performance and using artificial intelligence to transcribe it into notation, to be able to figure out chords from MIDI recordings, and being able to figure out chords from audio recordings, stuff like that. That would probably fall under the realm of AI by a lot of people's definitions. So, so those are a couple of things that I think could be considered. Okay, so we have a question from YPE who asks, "Hi Greg, what could be the issue that my CPU starts spiking with no VAT in progress, maybe no VST in progress?" So a lot of times it could be like an interrupt. So I'm not sure if you're running on Mac or Windows, but sometimes when you go into a particular file, you have your system running, there could be different parts of, and we're not necessarily concerned so much with CPU performance, but audio performance. And those are kind of two different things. And realize that while we want stable audio performance, we don't want different drivers to necessarily kind of go and interrupt the audio performance. So let's say if your display driver or your network driver or your Wi-Fi on your system, like while it's trying to do a math calculation, interrupts that processing. Oh, I'm looking for a Wi-Fi network. Oh, I'm looking for a Wi-Fi network. Or I'm looking for something with the video display. So often there's different components of your system, especially if you're on PC, and a great utility to kind of find these troublemakers, if you will, or something that's interrupting the audio performance. You could use DPC latency mon. So LATNCY latency mon, MON by DPC, and it's a little utility, and that could help isolate different components. Many times it's going to be a video display driver, and if you often what you want to do, and it may seem counterintuitive, you don't want it for the fancy game settings. You want it to be like on the NVIDIA, you could have kind of like game mode or studio mode. And studio mode is often kind of maybe a couple driver versions back. It's not as fancy. And that's what you would want to utilize for your DAW performance so that you have best audio performance from your system. So if you're running Windows, try using DPC latency monitor, DPC latency mon utility, and that could often help isolate the particular culprits. All right, Alessandro Braz asks, is there a way to draw preset shapes like triangle, sine, or square on the automation lanes? All right, so let's go ahead and open up the automation lanes here. So if we switch our drawing tool, we could just click right here. So a lot of times it may default to a line tool, and this will allow us to draw in kind of straight lines on our automation like so. But if we wanted to do something that was more akin to, I wanted to have like triangle wave, square, or sine wave. So let's say, okay, I want to do my triangle wave. I could start here. And if we wanted to hold down the shift key, we could change the frequency. So let's say I would just wanted to have maybe, and now we could just draw in like a triangle wave, or if we wanted to draw in, if you select the tool, then click the left mouse button, we could select between. So if you wanted to be a parabola, we could do that. Or if you wanted to be, again, let's say a square wave. So as soon as we select the drawing tool, we could now just kind of draw in automation. So let's say if we wanted to be, roughly, and we could just kind of draw in the shapes, and you could see it kind of underneath, so we could adjust kind of the value of it. And as we go over to the left, if we wanted it, we could adjust, the frequency. So as soon as we come here, you could just draw in different automation shapes. So try going to the line tool, and here you could have straight line, parabola, sine, triangle, or square wave. And that works for drawing in controller data on a MIDI event or for automation data as well. All right, so we see Uno Momento from Finland. Thanks for joining us. We have Matt Elston checking in from London. He says he's addicted to the stream. Thank you to all for making it fantastic. All right, so wonderful to see Mark Rabin from Montana in the United States with Stella, his dog. Glad that you can make it today. It's always great to see you on. All right, and we have Soren checking in from Sweden. All right, so we have a question from Greg Malik. It says, I have a PC, Windows 10, running Cubase 12 Pro in small rooms with my synths and audio I/O, one room with my guitars and IKM, Axe I/O. I got monitors and USB working in both rooms connected to the PC. To the Cubase, switching between interfaces is messy, sometimes needs rebooting. Considering buying a cheap second computer and use VST Connect, but one Cubase license can't run on two machines simultaneously. Please help. So if you're running Cubase 12, you could run your Cubase 12 on, I think technically you're not supposed to run it on multiple computers simultaneously, but I don't think there's any restrictions that will prevent you from doing that. So, and then if you had VST Connect Pro, you could simply, record from one room, into another room. I'm just kind of rereading just to set up again. And there may be, I know in like the older, like in the early 2000s, a lot of people would have KVM switches so that you could access the same computer and same monitors, and you could have the same keyboard, video, mouse, and use between those different systems. Some people will also use kind of remote control access to record. So, but you could definitely run your Cubase. You try running your Cubase on, if you're running Cubase 12 on multiple computers. I think it may work, and it may not be within the licensing, but I think it may still work. You could experiment with that. And if you do use VST Connect, when you record through VST Connect, it's basically going to not require a license. So if you're on Cubase 11, where you need the USB-E licenser, the VST Connect Performer, which is the software that's being recorded, doesn't require Cubase to be open. So let me know if that makes sense for your workflow. And we see that Jazz Dude already posted the link to the latency mon. Thanks for doing that, Jazz Dude. Appreciate it. All right, and wonderful to see Michael Pierce from outside London. He's in the middle of sessions. It should be hopefully wrapped up in a couple hours. Great to see you on, Michael. Have a great session. We'll see you pop in a little bit later. All right, wonderful to see John Costigan checking in from Kenosha, Wisconsin. And Spike Williams sending greetings from Rhondda in Wales. And Greg Malik is saying aloha from Hawaii. I'm so jealous. I got to go to Maui in April, so had a wonderful, wonderful vacation there with my family. So wonderful in Hawaii. So. All right, so we see from production. Hello, sir. I'm new to Cubase. Would you show how to audition samples in various speed, like halftime or double time? So when we come over to, the loops, and we wanted to audition. So right now it's going to audition directly tied to the tempo. So there isn't like a half or double time. So if you wanted to do something like that, you could say, okay, I want to just switch my tempo to 45 beats a minute, and then, or if we go to 182, we could come over here and just be able to audition in half or double time, but there's no real provision because it's going to be so tightly kind of integrated with the tempo when auditioning. So, but there currently isn't like a half or double time for auditioning samples within the media bay. All right, so we have Tommy C checking in from Dahlonega, Georgia. Thanks for joining us today, and great to see Daniela Tocan on. All right, and we see Dallas LaRue just checking in from Las Vegas, saying hi from Las Vegas. And we see that Mark Rabin's dog Stella is working on her drum / scratch voice howl, and she has good timing, so it's always good. All right, so we see a nice comment from Daniela. Says, Greg, I did like your 2 videos that were posted this week very much. Thank you very much. Yeah, I kind of did those. Sometimes they take like a month before they come out. But thank you for the kind words. I'm glad that they're helpful. All right, so we see from Soren says the chord pad pattern is cool, that you can play a rhythmic pattern and a chord pad, but is it possible in some way to apply a pattern to legato 1 bar chords so it becomes a rhythm pattern? So if you have, something set up, so I'll just go to a different project here. So there's, several different ways of being able to get a particular event in. Just get this project open. Okay, so let's say we have something from our chord track here, and let's just say I wanted to take like a different rhythmic pattern. So let's say I want to do all right, so let's say we have like I want it maybe that particular pattern, that rhythmic pattern. I'll just maybe delete and we go to our chord pads. So instead of playing chords, we could take we could just take like normal patterns here and just drag and drop, so that as we audition, So we'll say, okay, we'll do our patterns, and let's say we have a half note followed by 2 quarter notes. Drag and drop, and then as we would go to audition from the chord pads themselves. So you could do stuff like that, but currently it's a pattern or just kind of block chords, and if you wanted to have it just default to pattern, there's also different particular patterns for guitars and keyboard that you could load up as well, but nothing where it's just automatically going to do different rhythmic variations, because there could be just a myriad, just thousands of different possibilities. All right, so we see Perry Michael Allen just says, hello, question. I'm running Cubase 11 on Mac 2020 Ventura. I reinstalled, and the only plugins that can't connect to my keyboard are Hallian SE and Sonic Groove Agent SE and 7. Never before, help please. Okay, so I'm not sure if your Mac 2020, if that is running in I think that the M1 processors I think may have been out then, so I'm not sure if it's an Intel processor or an M1 processor, but those licenses aren't going to show up natively as M1, or if you're running it in Apple Silicon mode. So if it is an M1 processor, an Apple Silicon processor, you may have to basically just run it as so make sure that you're running it as Rosetta mode, because those plugins aren't going to be Apple Silicon native. All right, so we see from Christoph Morozla, says, if I'm familiar with Reaper, will switching over to Cubase not be much of a problem? Thanks, I'm about to switch. So I've never worked with Reaper, but I think it seems like a lot of the concepts, of DAWs were pioneered by Cubase, and many of the fundamental concepts were derived from Cubase because it was a pioneer in the field. So I don't think that you'll have a hard time switching. And all right, so we have so we see Daniela Tocan says, running Cubase 12 and Hackintosh Catalina. My audio interface is end of line Catalina. So I'm not sure if that's maybe a comment directed towards Perry, Daniela, or let me know if it's a question for me. All right, so we have Dorn Boonthorn just saying, hello, I'm a fan of Cubase Pro from Cambodia. Thanks for joining us. It's probably the middle of the night there, so thank you so much for being on the live stream from Cambodia. Wonderful to have you, and we hope to see you on future live streams. Let us know if there's anything we could do to help out. Okay, so we see from Daniela saying, I downgrade in future to Cubase 11 because the dongle. I'm not happy with the situation now. So I'm not sure if you need to, if you don't like the dongle or you do like the dongle, or why you feel the need to download the Cubase 11. So if you wanted to run the dongle, I think that the new licensing system has worked out really well for most people, where you could have it on up to 3 different computers without any incidents. So if you could maybe, Daniela, just explain why you need to downgrade to Cubase 11, or if it's just that you are stuck at, or if it's just because of the operating system kind of running Catalina on your Hackintosh. All right, so we see from Andy Rowe, says, "Hey Greg, I hope you understood my confusing question regards from Reading in the UK." So I think Andy's question I had to save for later, but we could go ahead and address it now. So let me just go to my Word doc real quick. Bear with me while I open up our program on my monitoring computer. All right. Okay, so I think the question was, so I highlight an area to delete with the mouse, and then I have a macro that deletes the highlighted area and uses the L key command and takes the cursor back to the start of the highlighted area. So ideally, I would like the cursor to rewind perhaps 2 seconds earlier than the edit point. Does that make sense? Okay, so let's say I had, and I'll just switch to a different project here. I just created a scenario so we could see it. Okay, so let's say I have this particular audio file, and we can see that for this amount of time, and it's probably going to be, if I switch to seconds, for 5 seconds, we can see that the actual audio waveform is smaller here. So I think what they wanted to do was to get rid of this event, get rid of this portion that's selected with the range tool, move this over. So we're going to get rid of this and slide this piece of audio over, and then roll and then go 2 seconds backward in time, so that we could audition this. So to do this, I created just a macro, and I'll show the macro here under key commands. This is the one. So I set up, so I'm going to use the left and right locator. So I'm going to set the transport locators to selection. I'm going to have the transport go to the left locators. I'm going to cut the time, and then under transport we're going to nudge cursor left, and this is being that we have our master time set into seconds as opposed to bars and beats, and that we have the grid set to 1,000 or 1 second. So if I execute this command, my playhead, this part should be gone. This part will slide over and take up this amount of space, and the playhead will be 2 seconds before, so that we could audition this particular edit. So we'll go ahead and run the macro. And now as we do that, we can see that we have now moved to 8 seconds, our playhead position. And it's 2 seconds before that particular edit. So you can see my playhead is here. So this is going to get rid of this selected range. So even if my left and right locators were elsewhere, it'll get rid of this range, move this over, then move the playhead position 2 seconds earlier. So again, this macro, we'll go under key commands. So transport locators to selection, transport go to left locator, edit cut time, transport nudge left. So we're going to do that for each second because our time value here is set to snap to 1000 milliseconds or 1 second. So again, to trigger this particular macro, come over and run it, and now we're exactly 2 seconds ahead, and our play position is there, so we could just audition and have a bit of a pre-roll for the edits. So let me know if that was what you wanted to accomplish. And let me just jump back to our live chat. And again, it was from Andy Rowe. All right, always wonderful to see Razel checking in from Denmark. Glad you could make it today. All right, so we see from the Three Dog Recording Studio. It says, hey everyone, I'm looking for help in setting up UR824 I purchased. I have trouble getting a signal to my outboard gear, and I'm not sure how to route the ADAT. I would appreciate any help. Thank you. So, once you have, so you could tell within the control panel for the audio interface whether, the ADAT ports, I think you could switch them between a SPDIF and an ADAT port. So make sure that you have the ADAT port, and then you should have the 8 analog inputs as well as 16 inputs that are utilizing the ADAT connections when you're running at 48K. If you're running at 96K, then you have 8 additional inputs. So once so you could first off make sure that the optical ports are set for ADAT as opposed to SPDIF. If it's set to SPDIF, then it's going to just do 2 channels, kind of like you're going from, maybe an old CD player or DVD player where you could go digitally in. So make sure you have it set to ADAT. And when you have it set to ADAT, you need to make sure that you have a device that would take the ADAT digital and then either give you 8 inputs or outputs, and there's a number of different, converters that will work over ADAT light pipe, so that you could take those, ADAT connections and fan them out, kind of distribute them to the analog world. RME was, is a good example, but, PreSonus and Audient has like an 8-channel mic pre that will go in over ADAT light pipe. Digital mixers will also have that capability as well. And so, make sure that first you have it set up for ADAT versus SPDIF, and that you have the connections going to like an ADAT, analog to digital and digital analog converter if you wanted to use those digital connections. But you do have 8 analog ins and outs, and what you want to make sure if you're using them for outboard gear is that you go to your studio to audio connections, and when you go to like an external effect, that you actually just come over here and you want to define the input and output of where, this is basically we want to connect an input and output from your audio interface out and we need to say we're going out of output 3 into this particular compressor, and then the output of the compressor is going back into input 3. Now sometimes one thing that could get you tripped up with this, if you do like kind of a straight, like we're going out of 3 and back into 3, is if you come over to the studio setup, come over, and when you select the audio interface, make sure that you try toggling your direct monitoring status, and if that's turned on, because that may kind of skip it, and just send the input directly to the output without kind of going through the signal chain as well. So if you could let us know if you're going out of the ADAT into particular converters as well, that'd be helpful. All right, always wonderful to see Nick from Essex, UK on. All right, so we see Spike Williams, who says, I understand I can install Cubase 12 Pro on up to 3 computers. Does this also apply to VSTs and libraries I bought? And if so, what is the best way to ensure access? So yeah, anything that's under the new Steinberg licensing, whether it's instruments, Dorico, Wavelab, Nuendo Live, VST Live, your Halion, your Absolute Collection, all their content, those can be run in up to 3 different, 3 different facilities, 3 different computers, and really all you'd have to do is just go to your, when you go to the other computer, just, install it. You log in to your My Steinberg account. So once you come over, once you have access to your My Steinberg account, you download it and install. You log in to the credentials on your Steinberg download assistant. And then if you go to my account, make sure that you're logged in here. And download and install, and then all you'd have to do is with the Steinberg Activation Manager, if it's not running, go to your Steinberg Activation Manager, which is a separate program, and all you'd have to do at that point is just choose to activate a particular license as well. So, and then you could just activate it on up to 3 different computers. So yeah, if you have multiple computers, it's pretty common for a lot of people to have maybe a studio computer. We have a lot of composers that may have, or a lot of users that may have, one machine in the studio, a portable machine, and maybe a setup at home. So that's a pretty common scenario, and that's why they went with up to 3 different activations that are available. So, all right, you see Nick is having a lovely sunny Essex, lovely sunny weather in Essex, UK tonight. So that's great. We're starting to get some more smoke from Canadian fires, starting to creep up again here in the Washington D.C. area. All right, so we see Nick just says, on a quantized panel, what does the ticks below the word rough bottom right tab do? All right, so let's go to our quantized panel. All right, so I think it's these ticks here. So let's see if we can figure it out. I don't know off the top of my head. Let's see if we can figure it out quickly. All right, so I'm gonna, these I believe are all quantized quarter notes. All right, so I'm going to move these 22 off, and we'll see if we have this set to 20 ticks and we quantize, let's say, let's see where it moved it to. All right, so let's see if we set it 22 ticks, and these are all 22 ticks off. So it almost looks, I'm not sure exactly what it's doing. I could look it up for, but it looks like it's, I'm going to just take off my iterative quantize. So looking at the values here. Okay, so let's see if we had to set to 22 ticks. Let me just see if I could just look it up real quick. Sorry for being lame. So it looks like it's kind of just moving it. All right, so it just allows you to kind of set within a particular area for randomizing the quant of randomizing within 22 ticks for the quantization. So as we do this, it's going to quantize roughly within 22 ticks either way. So it looks like it's just, so it's kind of a random variation, it looks like. Sorry for not knowing that. I should know that. All right. All right. Always wonderful to see Gerald Ely from Martinez, California. I'm glad you can make it today. So you see from Oliver Poole, who asked, hello, I was wondering if there are any specific things that Cubase Artist 9 can help with when it comes to vocals. You know, so obviously being able to comp vocals and be able to, you know, so if we wanted to do like a composite recording of different parts, you know, where we want to take like maybe someone did 10 different vocal takes and be able to compile them. So if we wanted to, let's say if we wanted to come over and take a vocal here, and I'll just create a quick, you know, so for tracking, being able to, take different parts. So if I was just kind of recording, and I have this in the cycle record mode, and let me just set an input bus. So if we were doing kind of multiple takes here, so say, you know, the singer did 4 or 5 different passes. At that point, we could say, okay, I want to take the best bits, and this could be obviously much longer, but we could go to lanes. We'll open up our lane view, and then we're able to, with the tool that looks like a hand, we could just come over here and say, I like this particular phrase, that phrase, this phrase, that one, and we could come up with kind of the best vocal performance between them. And often, dealing with vocals can be, problematic. Like if you wanted to take, like, one particular word was too loud or too soft, you could just grab kind of the range tool and say, okay, I want to take this phrase, and you could just hit Shift X, and at that point, we could just say, okay, I want to take this and adjust the gain up or down. So if you, or let's say, like, as you zoom in, you had like an annoying breath that was like, and you didn't want to hear that, you could just take that particular breath and we'll split that and say, okay, I want to take both of these events, and we could, bring the breath down going into plugins. In later versions, in Cubase 12 or 11 Artist, they included Very Audio, but if you wanted to do some vocal correction, you could go to the Pitch Correct plugin, and here you could set the key. So you could say, okay, I'm in D major, and then you could have this would kind of do real-time tuning to pitch correct vocals. So those are some of the things that you could do for helping out your vocals in Cubase Artist 9. Let me know if that's helpful for you, or if there's something else you wanted to do. All right, so we see Daniela, just her comments about the dongle, says she likes the dongle because it's secure, and with the dongle server works all with less latency from a remote with a virtual machine. So I could assure you that the dongle would probably have more latency because there's a lot of dongle calls that go on in the program, and it's always susceptible to being damaged or lost. So those are some other aspects to consider. And if you lost your license, going through the process, and for people, we've had during major updates where the server for the dongles could get so overwhelmed that it was, we had one update cycle where the server died twice in 3 days because of so much activity on it. So but the USB-E licenser, there's a lot of different parts of the program that would automatically look for the USB-E licenser. So for that was probably more invasive than not having it as part of the program. So. All right, my chat field just jumped. Okay, so we have a question from Steve Green. Says, hi Greg, any thoughts on 1960s, 70s Hammond organ sound, or if anyone follows, knows of a third-party plugin? So there's a lot of them. So one of them that comes, I think it's part of the, it may be an add-on sound set to Hallian Sonic, or comes in Hallian, is going to be so I'll just show it in Hallian Sonic here. I don't think this is standard with Hallian Sonic, but you can purchase it separately. It's going to be the Model C. So if you just wanted to come over here and you're looking for kind of classic organ sounds, you could just kind of come directly over here. And what's kind of cool about this is, you have all the drawbars, and you just have this as part of. So, all of your drawbars can be available. And if you, I'll just turn off the chord tracks here. And you have, the full amplifier section that you could run. So if you wanted different effects, but if you wanted to just kind of have. So again, just kind of come over and. So a lot of just, pretty amazing. So, there is like some of the sounds that you could buy separately for Hallion, which will include this instrument, but part of the Hallion engine is an organ oscillator. So as soon as you wanted to come over and, just hundreds of different kind of classic organ sounds, so, really check out kind of what's available in the Model C as well. So that'd be a great place to start. And then you could have like the Leslie effect kick in when you grab the modulation wheel. So lots of great organ sounds in with that particular instrument. All right, so we have VA Romney official just saying hello, teacher, and says love you for sharing. So thank you for the kind words. All right, so we have a big howdy from Brian Sawyer Sr. from Beulahville, North Carolina. Glad you can make it today. Hope you're doing well. All right, so we see from Andy Rowe says, awesome, Greg, thanks so much. So yeah, I hope that kind of answered the question. Sorry for misunderstanding by email. Okay. So let me just, just find, I see Steve Green just says, I look for the Hammond but couldn't find one. Anyone send a link? Thanks. So let's go ahead and I'll just find the direct name of the little sound set that you can get, and there's other sorts of wonderful instruments in there as well. I'll just look for the okay, so it's going to be the Hallion Sonic 7 collection. So here you could have and that would give you kind of the let's see if we go into, so once you come over here, then within this you see that you have the different instruments. Let me just jump back to, I think it's just this Hallion Sonic 7 collection. So we'll come over here to details, and you could try out a trial version. But this would include, pretty sure this is what would include the sounds. So, but check that out, and you can see that you have the Model C instrument in there. So it's a great organ to get. All right, so we have Uno Momentos watching through a terrible thunderstorm. We hope he maintains internet connection. All right, so we see a question from Justin Gladish. Hey Greg, Cubase 12.06 build 453 audio no longer matches when we export audio into their video timing frames per second. So what I would do is in the video, make sure that when you go to the project menu to project setup and you hit shift plus the letter S, if you're in Europe, it may default to 25 frames per second. If you're in North America, it may default to 30 frames per second. But click right here and just click on get frame rate from video. And then if it's set up for like drop frames, or you have 29.97 drop frames per second, etc., that this will automatically derive the correct frame rate from the video and set the project to that. So once again, go to your project menu to project setup, and you could get the frame rate from the video, and that will be automatically be extracted, and then that way the frame rates, you're sure to have them matched up. All right, so we see Lawrence Koch checking in from Rhode Island. Glad you can make it today. He was able to make it earlier than normal, I think. All right, so we see from Plastic People Records. In the MIDI window, there's no area select tool. I often want to select from the start of the first MIDI note to just before the start of a later MIDI note in order to loop, and press P to cycle anyway too. So if you're kind of running into that, so like a lot of times, we like on our project window, we could have a range tool and we could set up a range. So, but there isn't a range tool in the MIDI editors. But if you select the event, one workaround is, I know this is a workaround, if you hit Control or Command plus Shift plus the letter I, that will open up the in-place editor. And we could see this MIDI editor just on the screen itself. It's like on the project window. So if I wanted to, let's say I select these notes and I wanted to, so a lot of times when we take this range and we want to duplicate it, it's going to just immediately duplicate it right after the end of the particular event. But since we're in the project window, we could switch here to the range tool. So we're going to just activate the range tool. I'm going to select the range. So I'm going to select one bar. So I'm selecting the empty spaces as well as the notes. The object selection tool will just select the notes. And now when I hit like Command D or Control D to duplicate, that we get that particular space at the beginning and end is automatically preserved. So if you wanted to utilize the range tool, just Control or Command plus Shift plus the letter I, and then you could access it directly from there. So let me know if that is going to help for you. So I pass it on as a feature request to Steinberg many times, so we'll see what happens in the future. Nick says, sorry for the tough question. I was feeling lazy and didn't want to invest the time in working it out. Laughing out loud. All right. So that's what I do. And I'm sure you like to watch me squirm a little bit when I don't know an answer to something. So, but I'm glad that I got to learn something new today as well. Okay, so we see clarification from Perry Michael Allen. Says in reference to his previous question, I'm running on Ventura 8-core Intel i7. Problem is the keyboard connects to Cubase 11, but not to Steinberg plugins and libraries, Howling and Groove Agent, etc. Thanks again. So let me know if it's not connecting to any virtual instrument. It could be, one is to make sure that you have the instrument either armed for record, and make sure, or monitored. And one thing that it could also be, if you have that set and you play your MIDI keyboard and you still don't hear anything, it could be a preference. So if we go to preferences and let's do editing, or let's just go to preferences here to MIDI. Make sure that MIDI through is active and that's checked. So now, even though it's armed, I'm not hearing anything. If I open up my virtual keyboard, it's not going to pass the MIDI. So make sure that you have this particular preference is also checked, the MIDI through being active. And you could also make sure that you have MIDI communication if you open up the MIDI inserts. And there's a MIDI insert called a MIDI monitor. And now, as soon as I play any note in, even if it's nothing is actually armed or monitored, I could see, or I guess it would have to be monitored. So at that point, I could just kind of see whatever MIDI messages are being transmitted to the controller. So make sure that you have MIDI communication first. Make sure that you have the track armed or record enabled, and that you have, it usually defaults to all MIDI inputs. If that's not set to, make sure this isn't set to an incorrect MIDI port of where your controller is connected. All MIDI inputs should capture everything unless you have gone through into your studio setup and to MIDI port setup, and make sure that your MIDI device is set in all MIDI inputs as well. So see if you have MIDI going into the system, and you'll see kind of the MIDI activity here in the lower right hand corner. So as I hit, we can see that. Make sure that you have the tracks record enabled. You could also check if it's going to be a licensing or a particular plugin issue. At this point, you could open up the instrument and play from the keyboard and see if you hear sound. That way you know that the instrument is working. And also, most of those instruments may also require that the presets and the content is installed as well. All right, so we have Arnold checking in from Germany. Thanks for joining us. All right, my chat field just jumped. Just find my spot. All right, so you see a question, you see a comment from Daniela Tokan, says 3 19-inch servers, Fujitsu I got from AMS, I won't butcher the German. One has 1.5 terabytes of RAM, the other is 256 gigs, so should last her well enough. Cubase never gets a crash. Yeah, having lots of RAM is helpful. All right, so we see from Ace Amadeus, hi Greg, hope you're well. Using Cubase 12 and or Groove Agent 4, what is the best way to split a Groove Agent kit into multiple tracks so I can EQ mix individual drum parts from them properly? Thanks. Okay, so let's say there's going to be like kind of two different approaches to this depending on if you're using a beat agent kit. So let's say if I'm here and a beat agent kit, or this is the acoustic agent kit rather, where we have different like an actual kit that's kind of loaded up. So when you come over here to our mix console, we can see everything is now going out of a stereo output. And if I wanted to activate, we could have up to 32 stereo outputs from Groove Agent 5. Groove Agent 4 had 16 stereo outs. But if you see like the acoustic drum kit here, we could go to the mixer, and all I have to do is just come over and say I want my kick to go out of output 2, and I want my snare to go out of output 3. So we just, in the mixer, we could choose our different outputs right here. So now these are going to discrete outputs. So if I wanted to put just a EQ on my snare, so this way we could have discrete outputs from an acoustic agent kit. Now if it's going to be a beat agent kit, where it's going to be kind of more MPC like, I'll just play a pattern here. All you would have to do is, so now everything's going out of a stereo output. So we'll go back to the instrument and select a pad and say, okay, I want this to go out of output 2. And I want this snare and hat to go out of output 3. So now, again, if I wanted to, and let's apply EQ to just this. And let's say I want to put a delay. Come over here to sends. Yeah. So now we'll add an effects channel. Let's make it just a quick delay. And let's say, okay, let's make this. So now if we unsolo, so that way, again, just in a beat agent kit, all you have to do is just select the pad here. The acoustic agent kit, you'll see it from the mixer. A beat agent kit, you're going to see it directly from, as soon as you select the pad, you can then send it to your different outputs directly there. So let me know if that's helpful for you, Ace, and thanks for joining us on the live stream today. All right, so we have Dr. Ing Manuel Ramsier joining us, so thanks for being on today. All right, so we see, Greg, how to split a MIDI keyboard into 3 instruments and play each on a different octave with third-party plugins. Okay, so I'll just do it. I won't do any splits, but I don't think I really have any third-party plugins installed on my work computer. But let's go ahead and okay, so let's say we'll add 3 instrument tracks of Hallian Sonic. Okay, so let's say I wanted a synth bass, just find something. Okay, so I want that for one layer, and let's say I wanted another part of the range to play back. We'll load up a different instrument. Okay, so make sure I have this. Okay, so we'll come here, go to, let's say, an organ. So we'll go to our Model C. And now I want it to do, let's say, a string patch for this instrument. So I have 3 different instruments loaded up. So we'll do maybe kind of FM pad. Okay, so I wanted these to automatically be split. So it's really easy to do inside of Hallion Sonic, but if we want to use it with third-party plugins, here's how we can do it. So I want the low notes to play this, and as I go up, I want it to cut off and go into my middle part to go into the organ, and then the high notes to go into that pad. So what we're going to do is activate just a input transformer. So I'll just put this onto the track, and then we'll open up the panel. All right, so here I want to choose to filter, and we'll say we want to filter type is equal to notes, and we'll say value 1 is going to be less or equal to, and I'm just going to hit the actual key here. All right, so we'll say C2. Okay, so now I have this active, and this is, and let me just set it up because I think I may have messed up. Okay, so we want to, we'll say, we want to filter out notes bigger or equal to. So as I open up, we'll just open up the keyboard editor here. And then it's filtered out here. So let's say from C2 to C3, I want to filter out notes, and I want these notes only to play back on the organ. So again, we'll go to our track, we'll go to our control panel. We're not going to transform, we're going to filter out notes, and we'll say value 1, which is the pitch, is going to be inside range. We'll say through C2 through C3. Okay, so we want to, we're going to choose outside range, C2 to C3. Okay, so now when we look at our keyboard, we have both of these set to record. So I have low notes, then it's going to go directly to organ. So let's say from C3 to C4, I want to only hear notes on this instrument. So we will again come over here to our track, open the panel, and we're going to select, or filter rather, notes where value 1 is going to be we'll say less or equal to C3. Okay, so now I have all these different tracks here, 3 different instruments, And as I would play back, go into the organ, now into the synth pad. So as you just play across your controller, that's how you can do a split between those different parts. And you could set that up, and you could layer different events if you wanted to, layer different instruments that are, anywhere, any combination in between. But that's how you can make a split using any three different virtual instruments if you wanted to. So let me know if that's helpful, Patrick. And glad you can make it on from India today. All right, so we have Cody saying, "Hey, Greg," in the chat. Hope all is well. So thanks for joining us today. All right, so we see from Patrick, how to global copy as shared copies, like select arrange, global copy, paste as shared copy. So I think it's going to be dealing with events as opposed to the data. So let's say I will just record something here. Okay, so we have, let's say, these MIDI events here. So if I wanted to, when we do a shared, it's not going to be the notes that are shared, but the container that is shared. So it's not going to be like selecting a range per se, but let's say we'll give it a shot and see if we could select just a range. So I'm going to take my grid off here. Okay, so let's say I want to take that range and do, all right, so normally we would just Command or Control D for the range. So let me just make sure I have my keyboard. Oh, sorry, I have this on. Okay, so let's say if I do that range, all right, so if I have just that particular set up, so if I've copied the range out once, then instead of, because when we have a shared copy, so let's say I have this, I want it to be a shared copy, I could just hold down the shift key if I did it correctly. So so if we hold down the shift key, we could just take that particular, so now if I make an edit to this particular event, all the other events will reflect accordingly. But let's try with the range. Yeah, so it's not, the shared copies aren't going to be dealing with ranges because we're not necessarily dealing with it at the note level, but more at the event level. So when we come here, now, it's this event, not the notes within the event that are shared. But, you could always just kind of, take that one, if you wanted a range, just cut it into a particular event, and then you could just say, okay, I want to take these And let's go ahead and duplicate those, and then we can see that each of those would be, we see this indicated by the plus sign, that the plus or the equal sign in the upper right hand corner of the event, that would be a shared copy, but it's a copy of the event and not the notes, which is why it kind of works at the event level and not the range. Okay, so we see a question from Patrick. How can I see the modulation which I made on each note with MPE and automation panel, or in, sorry, just an email blocking question here, or in automation panel or in velocity panel would be much easier, and an easier way to see it if it was all. So if we wanted to see like an MPE event on a particular note, so let's say if we're in here and we want to see the note expression. So let's say I come and I just want to, let's say I'll just take my snap off. And as we come here, so right now we have note expression data, but we don't see it. But if we just come directly up to here, we could say show note expression data, and then you could see it on the curves on the various notes right there. So let me just make sure. Yeah, so you're not going to see it in the velocity panel because the velocity is a component of the MIDI notes, but just come over here and make sure that as you draw in, if you have your MPE data from, let's say, like a Rolly computer or Rolly controller, just come over here and make sure that this is actually showing the note expression. Then you can see the note expression data on the particular note, just like that. So just make sure that this icon is enabled here for the show note expression. Then your various controllers will become visible on the notes itself, which probably makes most sense because it is kind of independent for each note. All right, so we see Free Jazz Bone just says, thanks for sharing the Cubase workshop videos, great content. Wish Hallian 6 was USB/dongle free. It's only Steinberg software, making me still use the Steinberg dongle. Rarely use Hallian anymore. So Hallian 6 isn't, but Hallian 7 is in the new Steinberg licensing. So consider upgrading. You get the Tails instrument, the Steinberg licensing, 14,000 other features in the FM lab. The FM lab is worth the upgrade price. So, but you could definitely, if you upgrade from Hallian 6 to Hallian 7, that will function under the new Steinberg licensing. So. Okay, so we see from Patrick Emmanuel A. Greg, how to make use of list editor? Can I transfer a note inside it? Never used it till now. How can you explain it? What's the easiest way to use it? And what situation is it so important? So the list editor can be like really important for, think of it as kind of like a microscopic level. So I want to, I'll just turn off. All right, so let's say if I just wanted to record some data here, and all right, so it's all right, now let's say something, and it used to be like really handy because when we had old school MIDI interfaces, there's only so much bandwidth that could go on. So if often you look at this part in a key editor and you're like, oh, okay, just a couple notes and holding, but sometimes you may have like a MIDI information that's going out to the device that's has a lot more data on it. So if I was to look at this, we get one perspective looking at our MIDI data this way. But if we wanted to view it a little more analytically, we could go to our MIDI into our list editor. So we'll see when we come here, we're going to have, okay, our note messages. We can see, oh, there's lots of aftertouch that the controller was transmitting. I see controller CC1. I didn't know, right? I didn't know I was transmitting aftertouch. That could mess up my MIDI communication with an external synth. I see a lot of CC1. I see more aftertouch. So let's say I want to get rid of all of the aftertouch. Like I didn't intend for there to be aftertouch. We can now come over here. We could see everything graphically. So, and we could set up our different filters. So make sure you have filters. And then we could just come over here and just say, okay, let's come to our filter. And I say, I want to take event types in data 1. So I want to take all of, I can say, let's select, here's all of my aftertouch. I want to get rid of my aftertouch. I can now hit Control or Command A to select all the aftertouch, hit delete, and then we'll choose no focus. And now I could just see the notes. So this is like if you're also putting in data for standard MIDI files where you want it to, see the lyrics, the text, the tempo, different information for metadata for standard MIDI files. You wanted to insert sysx commands. You could come over and use the list editor for doing sysx stuff. So it used to be like this was like in the early days of MIDI sequencing, and when people go, oh, they would look at this, people would just look at this, and this is how everyone did their MIDI editing. So it's almost like just looking at, metadata for everything. I still know people that can edit MIDI data so incredibly fast and type in and actually, I have a friend who did like tons of hit records in the 70s and 80s and 90s. And he could just sit here and just type in all of this data. It's like, oh, play a funky bass line. And he would just type it in the sequencer in the list editor. And he was incredibly fast at it because this is how early sequencers worked. Primarily now, what I use it for personally is oh, something weird is going on in that MIDI track. What actual data is in that MIDI track? And that's when the list editor is really good at exposing that I have some notes. And with the list editor that we have in Cubase, we can see kind of even a graphic timeline. So we can see, okay, we see these notes like short notes followed by longer notes. So, and there's a lot of aftertouch, there's a lot of CC1 data. So this will expose all of the different types of MIDI information that are in the part that are there in the key editor, but you may not see them or may not be as obvious. So that's often why people will use a list editor. Okay, so I just see from Patrick Emanuel A, how can I transform render audio track into MIDI track where it was rendered previously? Like if I move a rendered track on its MIDI, it should change into MIDI. Is it possible? So I guess if you want to take, so let's say if I have this event here, and let me go ahead and we'll do a render in place. So I will come over here and okay, so now let's say I have my rendered file. So generally it's, you could take your MIDI and then turn it into audio. If it's a monophonic source, we could turn it back into MIDI. So, but if it's going to have chords, it's not going to automatically take the audio. What you could do is, like, if you wanted to keep those together, you could hit Control or Command G. So I see where it says, if I move a rendered track on its MIDI, it should change into MIDI. Is it possible? So, like, if for some reason you wanted to, move both of those together and keep those kind of linked together, but the rendered audio track isn't going to go back to, unless it was a monophonic source, it's not like a bass or like a solo line, we would have to do a conversion from that back to MIDI. But you could, during the render in place process, you could choose to hide the particular tracks and still have the MIDI data there. It could be replaced, or you could still have the rendered events, or have the rendered events muted so that they could coexist together. But it's not going to automatically just kind of take this part and find the rendered MIDI. But you can, group the two events together just by hitting Control or Command plus the letter G. And then if you wanted to ungroup with them both selected, you could hit Control or Command plus U to ungroup, and then they could move independently. So let me know if that's helpful. All right, so we see from AG Entertainment, says FPS is set to 70 frames per second. This may be referencing to our earlier question. And the frames per second matches what YouTube sends. Make sure also that if your audio is kind of out of time, make sure that it's not a sample rate mismatch also, because that could have an effect. Okay, let me sorry, my chat field just jumped on me. So we see Jay from Secret Studios asked, since you're on Yamaha and many products and manufacturers, wanted to ask if you're aware of any existing analog, non-digital upward compressors. I don't follow all the hardware compressors maybe as closely as I should, but I don't know any off of the top of my head. But there may be some. So now we're in a stage where we have, interestingly enough, hardware trying to mimic software. So, but it may be something that's a little more, in more for particular software processing as opposed to mimicking. But maybe someone else knows and could share, who may have more experience with it. All right, so we have a question from Plastic People Records. Could you get a quick explanation on the MIDI file export resolution under file export MIDI? What is resolution? Example, resolution 460 or something. So it's probably 480. So it used to be. So we'll come over here to our preferences and we'll go to our MIDI file export. Okay, so we go to our MIDI file and then we could choose our export resolution. All right, so over time, sequencers have gotten what they call more PPQ, parts per quarter note, and that's what the resolution is. So that means that, earlier sequencers would be like 96 PPQ, meaning that there was 96 divisions per quarter note. So you could have a MIDI note fall between 96 different places between a quarter note. And then like early Cubase on Atari, I think version 1 was 384 PPQ. And then we went up to 19,000 or 1920, so it kind of would double over time. But now the MIDI timing is based in Cubase is tied to the sample level. So this is the highest resolution of MIDI. So we can have MIDI notes not only be falling to 480 parts per quarter note, but it could go to 1/192,000th, or you could go to 1/384,000th of a second in Nuendo. So it's based on the audio sample resolution and not the MIDI PPQ. Now, why we have an export resolution is many programs don't have this capability of being able to figure out what the resolution. They can't deal with anything that's higher than, let's say, 480 PPQ. So if we give something that's, 1/192,000th of a second, another sequencer that's going to import that MIDI file may not be able to interpret that. And we often have this scalable, especially for the days when people would use hardware sequencers live and put it on a floppy disk, put it in there like a Roland MC500 hardware sequencer. And that had, specific limitations. Some of them were 128 PPQ, some were 120 PPQ. So, and people would often feel that the PPQ gave better feel for MIDI and it wasn't as rigid and machine-like. So for compatibility, when we export MIDI files to other programs or to other devices, and this could be hardware sequencers, it could be sequencers in like keyboard workstations. Those don't deal with sample accurate resolution. Their sequencers are going to be tick based. So that's why we have the export resolution of 480 parts per quarter note or 480 ticks per quarter, so that when we export it, it could be played back in a keyboard workstation, a hardware sequencer, or other DAWs that don't have the capability and the resolution of having a sample accurate MIDI resolution. So that's why we have that setting there. All right, so we see from... All right. All right, so we see from Sven Isaacson says, I also sorely miss a dongle. Been using dongles since SX1, got 2 of them, never had a single problem during all these years. However, I've had several HD SSDs die on me. So I've had my same dongle since SX1 as well. But the current licensing system isn't resident on the, it's not necessarily tied to the hard disk. So we shouldn't equate, a hard disk failure rate with the failure rate of the licensing system. So, but I understand the point that, the dongle has been very reliable and built well. I used to do 120 flights a year, and I did that for 20 years with a dongle and used the same dongle, for that particular reason. Just, and never had an issue. Went through the washing machine several times. I don't recommend it, but mine did. Okay, so got your, just says, Cubase, could you show us how well the unmix feature works in Spectral Layers Pro 10? Take a fully mixed song and unmix it and let us hear the final result, especially on a vocal. Okay, so let's go ahead and I'll just do something that's not copywritten that YouTube won't ding me on. I have some stuff that works amazingly well that's not YouTube friendly. Okay, try this. I've never tried it on this particular project before. Let me just... Okay, so we'll use Spectral Layers to unmix it. We'll just kind of listen to it.
Let you know what I'm about and what is in, what is outside in the cold. I walk alone to my own beat, and when we meet...
Just to give you barometer, so let's go to Spectral Layers, and this may take just a little bit of time. We'll go to Unmix, and we'll go to Unmix Song, and we'll do vocals, guitar, bass, drums, and do other, and we'll choose best quality, and we'll hit OK, and this will take just a little bit of time. So what this is doing is kind of using, we had a question about artificial intelligence, AI stuff. So this is a pretty good use of AI stuff, because what it's actually going to do is just take it's taking our 2-track mix, and then we're going to be able to kind of extract the different components from it. And I've never done it on this particular song, so I don't know how it's going to turn out, but it usually does a great job. And these algorithms, and I often make the analogy, this is like, taking a cake and then, that's been baked that you made, and then taking the eggs out, taking the milk out, or, whatever components that you added in the cake, and then, almost like putting the eggs back in the shell and being able to, go backwards to do that. So we're about 60% done. All right, about 85%, 87%. So it's kind of typical rock band kind of production. All right, so let's go ahead and, so it's broken it down. So we'll go ahead and play.
Let me tell you lies about me.
There's the drums.
Tell me it. At September 4th.
then we'll have non-unmixed.
Diamond ring looks so sophisticated. Only girls that show it, you don't know. I was telling lies about me.
And it's even catching the
I was
delays.
telling lies about myself.
Is that okay? We want to mute the bass. Mute the drums.
Let me tell you lies about me. Let me let you know what I'm about. What is outside in the. Let me tell you lies about me.
So give you an idea of the quality, and you could do little tweaks here and there, but you know. And then if you wanted to take just a particular part out, we could just drag the vocals out directly into the project window, and now we could do editing, add more effects, whatever you wanted to do. So it's pretty scary what you could do with Spectra Layers 10. So these guys are really amazing what you're working on. All right, so we have a question from Nick. Wondering if there's any key command to reload the track preset rather than clicking on the button on the track. Trying to build a macro, enable track, and reload track preset. So there isn't a particular button to, for reloading the track preset. I know that some people want to do it for just enabling, so it's not taking up particular CPU processing in a large template. But, I'm not sure if you're enabling the track, if you need to have the particular track preset disabled. If the track is disabled, then it's not taking any CPU cycles. It's, but there isn't currently a key command. I'll pass it along again as a feature request. I know I've done it several times over the years. As a way for people to handle large CPU heavy projects in a template, but there currently isn't one, but I'll pass it along. Okay, so we see from Sven Isaacson, just saying for remote setup, I could remove my dongle and therefore keep my license safe. Now I will lose the license as well if my computer gets stolen. I used to be able to have Cubase installed on friends' computers and bring my dongle with me. So if your computer does get stolen, you could deactivate the license remotely on that computer. So you could do that from your My Steinberg account. And then you could also, if you wanted to go to your friends' computers, you could install your Cubase, log in and out, and deactivate and activate. So you could do that via like a two-factor authentication. So you could, as soon as you leave your friend's studio, or as soon as you're ready to leave your friend's studio, just simply deactivate the license from your My Steinberg, log into a web browser, and deactivate it from there. So it shouldn't be a problem. So Sven Isaacson just also says it was common among studios to have Pro Tools and Cubase installed and let the client bring their license dongle. That is no longer possible with Cubase, but it is with Pro Tools. Again, all you have to do is sign into your account. And most Pro Tools licenses, I think, are kind of like cloud-based as well, so it's often pretty similar. But you can just go to any studio, install the Cubase, and just log into your My Steinberg credentials and activate the license, and as you leave, just deactivate the license. So it could be treated very similarly. So. All right, so we see from Ace Amadeus, hi Greg, in Cubase 12, do we have the ability to create a gated plate reverb to use on snare drum and toms to simulate the 80s Phil Collins sound? Thanks. All right, so let's go ahead and we'll just open this up. All right. Just make this. All right, so say we could probably even do it internally. So let's come over to our aux send effects. Let's go to, let's say, our reverb. All right, and I want the reverb to, and I'll just go ahead and route this particular agent. I'll just put the reverb on the snare. All right, so now, so we have aux 1. Let's get to the aux and edit the reverb. So now we could say we want like a huge room, but we want load time. So, it's like really all you have to do is, so let's say, okay, we want our main time for the reverb to, and we could even probably just put a gate after the reverb. So let's come over here to dynamics and put a gate after. So if you wanted to just adjust the threshold down just on the reverb, so as you go to the send, so, but really it's all you had to do kind of with, is just put a gate after your reverb, kind of the classic trick of, used in studio records. To just take a big reverb and, plop a gate right after it and just gate the reverb send. So you could do it very easily. All right, so we see from Club to Breathe, is there a way to lock the horizontal scrolling of individual MIDI clips from the left? I would like them not to scroll both sides, shift plus scroll wheel. All right, so let's come over and all right, so say we're in the key editor here. All right, so you want to all right, so if you don't if you don't scroll, it's going to be locked. If you are to the point where you don't want it to follow, like to follow the play along, you could just turn off the auto scroll, and I will come over here and we'll just solo this. So as you play, if you don't want it to scroll, but now if I activate scroll, it will follow. But I don't know of a way to, it's not going to scroll, unless you, specifically scroll. So I don't know a way to lock it, but if you don't want it to automatically advance, and then if you didn't want to scroll but you wanted to see more, it could be just where if you just zoom in, so I'm not sure if, it's not going to scroll unless uh, it's not going to scroll unless you specifically scroll with it. All right, wonderful to see Bruce Bruton from Simi Valley. All right, so we see from Nick, it says when you load a track preset on a multi-channel instrument, let's say 1 to 2 routed to 3 and 3 and 4 routed to back for a specific surround or quad group track, the track doesn't recall assignments correctly, 4 to 3, 4, they just go to main out. Hopefully this gets fixed. All right, so let me see if I add an instrument track, and we'll do Hallian. I think we still have a... So let's say if I have this set to a surround output, all right, so let me add a surround output, my audio connections here. Okay, so I'll just set this up and let's save it as a track preset. Okay, so I will... just overwrite that. All right, so right now this is going to my 5.1 out. All right, so I'm going to reload. All right, I'll try disabling the track real quick. So it looks like it's still, let me know if I'm doing something different. I know maybe you're using contact with that, but if we try with that, and we'll open up the channel, it's still routed to the 5.1 out, but let me know if I need to so I just loaded that track preset again, and I'll check its audio out, and it's still routed to the 5.1 out. So let me know if I'm doing something differently than you are, Nick, or if I'm disabling it differently. All right, so we have a question from Ecstasy Tunes. Is there a way to set the end marker to stop the playback? So I think like if we have our left and right locators here, that we could, under transport, we have a play mode. So we can say transport, we can say play until left locator or something like that. Or play to next locator. Or play to project end. So there's the function right there under transport. So with the last event of the project, you could just say, or play project range. You could play the selection range. You could play until next marker. Or from transport commands, you could choose, play to project end. Or is it? Yeah, go to project end, or just again play project range. You could just play selection end, or play from selection end. So you could play until selection end. So if you have like one marker, you could just have that set and just have it automatically stop. All right, so we see a question from Ace Amadeus. Greg, could you please explain how to use the Cubase 12 dissolve feature? Is that for drum kits or for audio? So it's going to be for like MIDI, and people often use it for MIDI drums, because what we could do is, let's say if I have a drum event here where notes are kind of on different particular channels, what we could do with the dissolve is take each of the notes and split them to different MIDI tracks. So we go to MIDI and choose dissolve part. We could separate by MIDI channels. So if you have a MIDI file that all 16 MIDI channels are in one track, you could dissolve MIDI channels, but we could also choose to separate pitches. And once I do this, my kick, snare, hi-hat will all be broken down into where each sound is now on its own particular lane. So that's what the dissolve function will do. Okay, so we have Robert Higgins checking in from Morro Bay, California. It says, hi, just deleted my favorites in Plugin Manager by mistake. How do I retrieve it? So a lot of times it's... So I'm not sure if you had a backup of it. It's probably the question you've already asked yourself. It's kind of perhaps adding insult to injury. But I think that once you're here, all right, so let's say if I go to this collection here, say October 22nd, and now if I delete the collection, So I'm not sure if there's a way to recover after that, after it kind of prompts you. So I'll just take a quick look, maybe see if it's hiding somewhere in, let's say, in the preferences, in the presets. All right, so let's look here, presets. Yeah, so I'm not sure if it's recoverable. They kind of give you they ask you for that again. I could do some more research on it but sorry that happened to you. But it does give you kind of the confirmation just in case you did it by accident. All right, always wonderful to see Charles K on. Glad you could join us today. So we see, hi Greg, a question from Ecstasy Tunes. Is there a way to see notes from multiple MIDI events in a reference, ghost notes, when working in a key editor without selecting the MIDI event? So you're going to need to select the MIDI event that you want to see. But let's say, okay, I have like these two events. So if I have these selected and I go into the key editor, here we could choose to, if we want to see the different kits. So let me just make this a little less. And I will choose just colorize by channel. So you would need to select them first, and then you could switch back and forth, but it would have to be selected before you go into the key editor, and then you could see the other events as kind of ghosted events. So if we again come over to say our key editor, so we can see now that that the electric piano is the active one, that this is what we're actually editing. Or if I wanted to go to one of the different drum events, we could just see the different events, but you'd have to select them before entering the key editor. All right, wonderful that Pindo Purba could join us today. Thanks for being on. All right, so we see from this Ninja Squared, can we get chord features on the tuner plugin that shows real-time chord playing? So I'm not sure if you want to see it, if you want to see it for audio or for MIDI. So, if you're doing MIDI, you could see kind of, if you're in record, you can see kind of the current chord display here, but, the tuner is not really designed as a polyphonic tuner, but you could take any audio source and then just simply drag it to the chord track and it would automatically do that. All right, so we have Best Green Jesus. He's lurking while out in 91-degree weather, so drink a lot of water, stay safe. All right, so we see, how do I show my waveform when recording guitar? Okay, so by default, Cubase will show the audio waveforms as audio is being recorded to them. So I'll just take this one event, I'll copy it a couple times, and I don't have an audio source set up, so I'll just set this to quick group channel. All right, and now, so if I want to set this, I'm going to add an audio track, and we're going to set it to our group channel that we just created. So as we record audio, I'll just go ahead and solo these. You'll see the waveform automatically draw while it's recording, and if it's not doing that, there is a preference. So we say we go to event display. Let's see if it's maybe it's under record. So if you go to preferences to record to audio, there's create audio images during record. If that's unchecked, then the waveform will be calculated directly after the file stops playing. So make sure you have that set, but by default, it should be drawing the waveform as it's being recorded. All right, wonderful to see Captain Energy Music. It says he forgot it was Tuesday, so we're glad you could make it. Thanks for joining us today from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania area. All right, my chat field just jumped. All right, so we see from Patrick Emmanuel A asks, Greg, what should I do if Cubase crash inside while working because of third-party plugins? If I deactivate all third-party, went inside, how can I turn them on again? Can you tell which one can we do on which one caused the crash? So if it's sometimes why we did the bypass third-party plugins is plugins would sometimes crash, and then because the plugin was bad, we couldn't start Cubase up. And when you go to restart Cubase, it would freeze on that particular plugin, and we couldn't get into Cubase. So why we bypassed the third-party plugins is that we can then get into Cubase, open up the project without the third-party plugins, maybe deactivate, disable that particular project, save it under a different name, and then open it again with third-party plugins. So it's not because, if you have a third-party plugin crash, sometimes it can corrupt the project, and it could corrupt that project from starting up again. Because if a plugin caused a crash, and and it's a problem within the project when it tries to activate that plugin, sometimes that's why we have the option so that you could get into Cubase without any third-party plugins, disable the track, and then launch Cubase again, and then be able to start Cubase again with that track disabled without that plugin kind of taking memory or causing issues. And at that point, you could, work with that particular track and get into it without the plugin loaded. So that's the intention of bypassing the third-party plugins. It's not to get rid of all third-party plugins. The intention is more of kind of a way to fix when it's problematic. Some plugins will give you, when you get the safe start mode, will give you and say this plugin crashed. Sometimes the plugins crash in a way that it doesn't get reported. It's so fast that Cubase doesn't have a chance to create to show which plugin was the culprit, and it's a lot of times it's out of our control when stuff like that happens. So, but the intention of the bypassing third-party plugins is so you could open the project, disable it, save it under a different name, and then reopen it without the suspected plugins active. So you could open up the project, maybe switch to a different sound or switch to a different plugin if necessary. So you see from Cody, says, great explanation for the list editor. Had some Atari 1080 STE, probably 1040 STE flashbacks. Yeah. So you've obviously been doing sequencing for a long time, but that's out. That was like the graphic way of being able to edit MIDI data. It's like, wow, amazing. You know. All right, so we see from Esteban Carlos Benson. Hey, hello, Greg. Sometimes my automation lines don't follow the track color. Do you know what causes this? All right, so let's say if I come here and I open up, so I open up the automation. So I think sometimes, let's see if the automation tracks can be set to a different color. So it looks like it's following the color here. But just out of curiosity, let's say if I copy this automation and I copy it, so copy, and let's say I'll come here to paste. Let's see if that affects colors. It looks like the automation tracks are showing the same color here. And let's see if it's maybe if the event is colored differently as opposed to the track. So let's say the event here is red, and sometimes you may have different colors for the events as opposed to the track. So make sure that this is the track color versus the event color, and these could be independent. So if you want it like this one to be a different color, you could have that set up, but make sure that it's the track color that's not matching versus the event color. Maybe that's what's causing the anomaly. And if you have a project with it, if you want to share it to me at clubcubase@steinberg.de, I'd be happy to take a look at it for you. All right, so a question from Pindo. I imported a MIDI file to a new project, then I added contact. For the first channel, it reads a contact as the MIDI output. For the second channel, it doesn't. What is the cause for that? So if you import a MIDI file, it's not going to, you may have to set the output for each MIDI channel separate, independently. So just because you change one track, one MIDI track, I'm just going to reread it again. So if it's the first track is going to contact or not, so check if you go to the preferences, and we go to import MIDI file. So let me know if you're importing it to MIDI tracks or to instrument tracks. So if you do to by default will open up like a general MIDI bank for Howling Sonic SE or Howling Sonic now. But we could also have this set to MIDI tracks, which would be independent of any particular independent of any particular instrument or instrument tracks. So see what happens if you try changing the setting to MIDI tracks and see what happens, and then you could try to route them all to contact and see. All right, so Greg Malik asks, is there a split stereo to 2 mono command? So if we come over to the track here, we go to project and we say convert tracks and we say multi-channel to mono, and we get different naming options, and we'll hit OK, and then at that point we'll have our mono tracks. So again, go to project to convert tracks. So we could choose mono to multi-channel to mono or mono to multi-channel, just like that. All right. All right, so Patrick Emanuel A asks, Greg, can I save input transformer for later to recall, and how can I do that? Is it possible? So yeah, the input transformer, we could just come over here, and if you save it as a track preset, the input transformer could automatically be incorporated. But you could also, as soon as you go to like the track settings for the input transformer, we could open a panel, and then really all you have to do is just come right over here and save it as presets. And there's a number of factory presets that come with it, or different user presets. So at this point, you could just save it as a preset, and anytime you open it up, you could just quickly recall the presets for doing splits in the zones like we showed earlier. Okay, so we see Esteban Carlos Benson says he takes back his previous question. Automation track adopts the color of the parent folder despite the track color. So let's give that a shot. Let me just put this into folder. All right, so now it seems like the automation is still tied to the track here, but we see from Got Yours says, Greg, thanks for the demo. I've been doing a lot of DJ mixes, remixes of older songs, and the spectral layers will come in useful. All right, we see Spike Williams has to go record some arrangements. So thanks for joining us. We'll see you on Friday, hopefully. Okay, so we see just a question from James Dalzell. Says, "Hey Greg, when should I use a limiter and how to use one?" So often the limiters are going to be used, often at kind of like maybe the last stage of a process. So often it's kind of a quick way to make up for deficiencies in gain structure of your mix. So people use it to make it sound hotter or louder on the particular project. So let's say in this example, I think there's a limiter my friend put on the track here. So let's
do you recall the day we first met? That was a long, long time ago.
All right, so let's say if I wanted to take like this master and I wanted to get more gain out of it. So this is kind of very typical use. Like, I've done a lot of stuff and it's just not quite as loud as I want it to be. At this point, you could just say, okay.
I'm so in love with you, just like a long, long time ago.
And sometimes we'll just go way too extreme.
Oh, I remember the day that we went. Seems like a long, long time ago.
And if we're to look at kind of our meters here,
And our first kiss, there was no.
so we could kind of attenuate the gain or try to get as close to like 0 dB as we possibly can get. So let's say I just want to come here, we'll put on maybe clean guitar, and here we hear kind of definite kind of pumping. So if your gain structure was not quite as optimized, we can use a limiter to kind of make it sound a little bit louder at the final stage. So it could sometimes affect transients, it sometimes could create pumping sounds depending on the material, but putting a limiter on a track often will can make it sound louder. I'll try another kind of rock project here, which is not so close to the edge gain structure wise. Alright, so we'll just come over here to this and put so when you need to, go to 11, as they say, on a mix, often the limiter is going to be, can give you that extra bit of energy. So that's when often limiters are used. And sometimes they'll use it as kind of a fail-safe to make sure you don't go above a certain threshold in your mix. Okay, so we see from Nick clarification. It says, what I mean is if you have, say, contact set up, it's a multi-channel, so you have fader 1 and 2 and fader 3 and 4 in your mixer. Those are routed to a quad group to save your preset, then remove the instrument, then hit reload. It reloads, but the faders 3 and 4 don't route to the group track you created. They just go to main outputs. Let's give it a shot with brand new project, see if we could recreate this for Nick. Okay, so we'll have okay, so let's say I have alright, so I'm gonna let's add a quick MIDI track. Alright, so say I have this going to output 2 into output 3. And both of these are going to say group channel, and we'll make it a quad. Alright, so now if I play both of these record enabled. Let's see if I need maybe a quad output. I'll play around with it some more, Nick, so I can spend a little more time with it. So, but I do have your email, so I'll respond to you by email. All right. So we see Tiago checking in from Brazil. All right, so we see from Luthier47, sorry for a dumb question while I'm here. What is the latest version of Cubase Pro? So it's Cubase Pro 12.07. It's a 12.070. All right, so Benny's just reminding people to hit the like button. So if you've learned it, if you learned a new trick, make sure you do hit the like button. Maybe we could summon Michael Teams to come and give ice cream. So. All right, so we see from Tiago, it says, question, each time I update my Windows 10 control room save preferences disappears and are lost. Is there a way to prevent this? So I just had a Windows 10 update this week. I've never had that happen to me, but let me know if it is the outputs here, like if you get to your audio connections in the control room. So one is make sure that it's like that your audio interface is still selected when we go to your your audio system, that we still see your audio interface, if that is still configured. And also if I'm not sure if you saved your control room setup as a preset, but that can't hurt as well. But I haven't had it affect Windows 10 update affect any of my preferences or routings for control room. So we see Quellen says, hello, Greg. Does Cubase have some oversampling plugins? So some of the plugins do feature oversampling. I think Squasher may be doing it. So let's say if I just wanted to come over here, some of it will do it kind of internally as needed, but it may not have a function to just simply turn on. But I think that Squasher, there's an oversampling setting, I think, in this one. But some of the plugins will will feature kind of oversampling. So, but they may not all just say oversampling on it. It may just kind of do it as needed. So. All right, so we see a question from Soren. Just says, Greg, my blind friend, have made a demo song. It fluctuates in tempo and consists of soft piano and singing only. Detect tempo has huge difficulties. Isn't there a way to manually punch into beats? So, what you could do is start off with the tempo detection, and that's always a great place to start. And then you could just use the time warp tool to manually adjust if needed. So if you come over, let's say, okay, I have my performance here, and I go to my tempo detection. And if you leave this window open, let's say we analyze, and if that window is open, it automatically kicks you into the time warp tool. And what you could do now at this point is just come over here and say, this is where measure 17 should be. And you could move the particular, bars and beats, and you could move the timeline here and it will reanalyze. But if you wanted to, manually do it, just make sure that when we're in the warp tool that we have warp grid. And now we could just adjust the tempo here. So I'm going to do that with warp grid activated. So now that warp grid is turned on, I'm going to do a tempo detection of it. So now I could make an adjustment here, and then it will just kind of recalculate from that point. Say, okay, this is where the downbeat is, and then it will do an analysis if this icon is turned on, and it will go from that point on in the song and do further analysis for tempo. So that's why it kind of puts you into the warp, and you want to choose warp to grid as opposed to free warp for that. So, but you could manually just come over here and just say, this is where measure 18 is, this is where 17 is, 21, whatever you want. You could manually adjust with the warp tool and create a tempo map that way. All right, so we see, hi Greg, question, can Cubase mix fader settings be exported to CSV format to store different mixes, or possibly alter in Excel and re-import changes back? Is there a way to re-import changes back into Cubase? So I don't know of a function that could take the mixer settings from Cubase to Excel as a CSV file. Nuendo has functions where we could take, like for doing markers and working with dialogue from text from markers to have that, but I don't know any way of taking the settings, the mixer settings into Excel as a CSV file. And, depending on, I'm not sure, maybe if you could share what the application is that you're trying to accomplish with it, Ted, and we might be able to do that in a different way. So I'm not, it's the first time I ever had, so I'm not sure what the application is of taking it into Excel, if you wanted to raise it by 10% or lower it by 10%. So, we could do automation, stuff like that within a project logical editor, but I don't know a way of taking the mixer fader values in and out as a CSV file. And it's great to see you on the live stream, Ted. Thanks for joining us from Los Angeles area. All right, great to see Michael Pierce back on. All right, so we see from Michael Pierce, kind of on following on Ted Springman's theme, is there a way to get a list of used plugins? Been having some problems with VSTs forgetting their settings, but have a workaround. I know they're in there, so let me just take a look at a particular project here. All right, so here we have kind of a number of plugins. Let's see if it's maybe in the project browser. might be able to get a sense of, I'm not sure if it shows like, it doesn't show the, may show the effects tracks, but so I don't know a way to automatically have kind of like a list of, like a list editor list of plugins that are used within a project. Sorry about that, Michael. We're glad that you can make it back. And sorry you missed a giveaway. So we gave away free studio time at Chapel Studios. Okay, so we see from Patrick Emanuel A says, Greg, that's really cool. I thought Cubase couldn't do it, but the things that I really love about Cubase is a live Q&A. And I was thinking, do Yamaha interfere with Cubase, or Cubase guys get to do our own? So I think Yamaha's pretty, they realized that they purchased Steinberg, 18 and a half years ago because there was a particular skill set that maybe they didn't have. So it's now part of their portfolio, and I think there's a tremendous amount of respect between the different engineering teams. And, I know that the Steinberg engineers think that what the Yamaha does with hardware is fantastic, and vice versa. So there's a tremendous amount of respect between the companies. All right, so we have Primatron just saying hi, Greg. So, all right, you see. Okay, so we have a question. Is there a way to remove all inserts for all channels? Sometimes I just want to start over. All right, so let me just add some more inserts here across so we can. All right, so say we have all these. I think we might be able to do it with, let's see if the Project Logical Editor allows us to. All right, so let's transform. You want to take, say container type is equal to track, and so we could do all of our effects. So let's see if we can just delete all effects if you're starting from scratch. All right, let me just. could bypass all the inserts like that. Alright, let me just see if I can. So another way to do it is if you have like a number of inserts, so we could bypass them all and you could replace them one at a time. But if we have this set into QLink, I think we could just come over here and get rid of all of them on like effect 1. And you could maybe, if you don't have automation, we could start off and take a mix console snapshot. So if you start your project, and let's say we have a number of inserts here. So if you are starting, so let's say we have this as our mix console snapshot that we could choose to replace. If you don't have automation, we could choose to come over here. Let me just create a new project here. Make it a little easier to manage. Okay, so I have 8 audio tracks. I go into my mixer, and let's say if I'm just kind of starting off, I could take a snapshot. So, and we'll hit OK. Now let's say I've added, I went crazy and got a little crazy with effects. I got a bit effects happy. So I'm going to load up just a number of inserts here. May have exited out accidentally. Okay, so I'll do this again. Sorry about that. Okay, so now I'll come over. I'll just hide my input channels. Okay, so I'm going to take a snapshot. So we're going to take a mix console snapshot. Okay, and now I have all these tracks. Okay, so I have all these inserts loaded. So what I could do is I could select the particular channels. So, and let's say I came over here and I wanted to make a new snapshot. I could just come back over here and just say recall snapshot 1, and then I could just have it without any of the particular. So let's say I have this, and I'll just get rid of these quickly. All right, so if I want to recall snapshot 2, I could come here. That's snapshot 2. Then I could say snapshot 1. And then we could have all of your inserts. So if you save an initial snapshot before you start adding effects, you could just come right over and just say, okay, now I wanted to recall this snapshot. And then you could have kind of different mix stages to have different plugins loaded or unloaded. So that could be another way of doing it. All right, so we see, just see from Zephaniah that I skipped his question, so I'm sorry if I didn't see it. But if you want to ask your question again, I'll see if I get to it, or if someone else. Okay. Okay, so I see it now. Sorry about that. How do you delete a temporary e-license key controller? So is it? I think if you're on Windows, that there may be a way. I don't think if it's like when you go to your e-licenser and you see kind of a temporary license, like if you have a trial version of some kind that you might. So let me know if this is like if you have a trial version that kind of laid out. I think that. I think on Windows there's a way to kind of go in. It may not officially be supported, but let me know. You could try to do maintenance on it, on the license, and see. But let me know if it's like for a temporary license. But I know sometimes that they will still be kind of resident even if they're not active. But I think if you Google, you may find a way. I think I've read online of people kind of doing a hack on Windows or just kind of going into some Windows components and being able to kind of reset some temporary licenses. Sorry for accidentally missing your question. All right, we see that Michael Teams has made it. All right. We've missed your ice cream. All right, we see Patrick on. Just sending thanks for answering his emails. Yeah, we'll take a look at your situation a little bit. You see Michael Pierce, that free studio time just requires a donation of a 1073N. So it seems fair. All right, wonderful to see Randy Lee on the live stream. Michael Teams wants everyone to whack the like button. All right, Uno Memento has offered a beer to Michael Teams. Okay, so we see from Ted Springman just says about his question about exporting to CSV files. Says his prime purpose is to export overtone series and spectral layers and document pitch and volume data as sort of a fingerprint of one voice and apply to another voice to match. So yeah, I mean, if you want to send me an email, I could put you in touch with maybe I could put you in touch with some of the developers and see if they're thinking along those same lines for spectral layers. See, Jazz Dude just mentioned that he knows how to hide the hidden files. All right. In Windows. All right, so I think we're caught up to some of the questions. Let's get to some of the questions that were sent in advance. I create a little project file to show some of this stuff. Thank you for all the wonderful questions. All right, so let me just open up my Word document with questions. Okay, so we had a question, how to add a set amount of space between events on the same track. All right, so let's say if I want to take this particular track and we see that we have events that are kind of right next to each other, and I wanted to set a specific amount of space between these. So maybe if we were doing like sound design or something for non-linear productions, so I'm going to hold down Shift and select all of the events. If we go to Edit, I think it's under Functions, we can now go to Set Spacer Between Selected Events. And here we can just set it in seconds. So we'll just say, okay, we want to do 1 second of space. And now we could just have that space between all of the events. So again, select all of the events, go to Edit, let's go to Functions, Set Spacer Between Selected Events, set your value, hit OK. All right, so on the last live stream, we had a question on how to select all events on a track, and similar to this, and move them to a new track and have this event go to the very beginning of the track. So instead of these 5 tracks going out horizontally, these, let's say 6 events going horizontally out, I want these to be vertical, all starting at the same time. So we will come over to, let's say, and I did this using a Project Logical Editor preset. And let me just recall. Okay, this is our preset. So let me just. All right, so let me say I just had made this. Let's see if I load up another preset, if we can get it back. Okay, here it is. Okay, so we start this off, and again, the goal of this is to take this, all the events on this particular track, and we're going to set up and move them from a horizontal orientation to more of a vertical, where they all start at the beginning of the project. So we did this right. So I set up three. We're going to choose to do a select, and we have three functions. So first function I want to do is edit select none, and it seems counterintuitive to do it first, but it's really kind of after the whole process starts. We want to go transport to locate the next event. We're going to add an audio track. Then we're going to come over here. We're going to say container type is equal to event, and we want to basically select events that are beyond the cursor. So with this, we're going to move the cursor to the start of the next event. We're going to add an audio track where you can give it a name if we want. And then we're going to select the event that is beyond the cursor. So we're going to select all the events beyond where the cursor is placed. At that point, we're going to cut all the events. So all the events are going to be selected. And then we're going to move the transport to return to 0 to the start of the project, and then paste it. So instead of doing a macro, we could have 4 steps before we select all, we have 4 steps before our project logical editor and 4 steps after. So we have 3 of these. So I'm going to go ahead and select this first event. I'll hit apply. We're going to give it a name. I'll just call it 1. And we can see, it didn't work as I thought it would. Let me just start with the event at the back there. So I'm going to start with the cursor at the beginning. All right, so give it a 1. And then we can see that all the other events have moved down to that track again. So this is moved down, so I'm going to hit apply again. We'll give it a name. We'll say 2. Hit apply. We'll call it track 3. We could give it whatever name you want. And then we'll come over here. So now each of the tracks will automatically be laid out for us vertically with this. Now, if you had multiple tracks already configured in the scenario, you could skip the add track and it would just go down to the next one. I didn't want to assume that you had multiple events that, again, were already selected. So if we wanted to, again, we will go back to like our original file. So I'm going to start right here. I'll remove like this track. So we're going to start at the beginning of the very first segment. I'll just remove this. So again, what we're going to do is we're going to locate the next event. So we're going to move the cursor to the next event. We're going to add the audio track. We're going to select all of the events after this particular event. that are beyond the cursor. Then we're going to cut those so they moves from this track. We move the position back to the beginning of the track, return to 0, and then paste. So start off with the track selected and the cursor at the start of that, and hit apply, and then just hit enter. And now all the tracks which were laid out horizontally can now be aligned vertically starting at the same point. So I think this might have been for Cubase X, if memory serves, but that's how you could do it. So again, and you don't have to leave this blank. I was just kind of playing around with different parameters. So we want to, and why we have the edit select none is that after it's all done, we don't want all, at that point we could clear the selection so that we could go through that whole process again. So we want edit select none, transport, locate, next event, add track audio. Then we want to choose select. Container type is equal to event, position is beyond the cursor, and then so it's going to select all the events beyond the cursor, and at that point we will cut those, return our transport to 0, and then paste. And that's how we could take it from a horizontal orientation to a vertical one, all starting at a particular point. All right. Hang on just 1 second. My son is visiting now, so he snuck in the background. Okay, and then we had Patrick had kind of we were discussing kind of how automation wasn't aligning to his grid, like for a drum part. So I'm going to, I'll just switch this quickly here. Let me switch back to bars and beats. Okay, so let's say I had like just a kick track here that was straight on the beat. Sorry, let me just reload this. I'm just going to reload this little project so we have the right notes. Okay, and last Friday's live stream, he was just mentioning that when he does automation, that the automation isn't sample accurate. So let's say we have our kick drum. It's going to be perfectly on the beat when we look at it in our timeline. So we'll switch to bars and beats. So as we look at this, it's going to be 1 1 1 1. Then we'll have 1 2 1 0, 1 3 1 0, 1 4 1 0, and it's just kind of repeated all the way through. So the notes are perfectly on the downbeat. And Patrick was kind enough to send a video where there was automation, and what he did for the automation was basically just to, as he drew in automation, that it was aligned to the grid. So he just kind of grabbed the grid. We had snap turned on by hitting letter J, and then he would kind of bring it up or down. And he noticed that it wasn't like the automation was maybe smearing some of the transients of the kick. So we're going to play this automation and see if any of the transients get smeared. So when I do this, we could see that the automation points again are going to be, and it looked like he had done it correctly from the video. So, but when we look at the automation points, that we'll see that these, so listen to it. So softer then louder. So that all seems to kind of work as expected. And I tried this on my PC as well as my Mac here. So everything kind of worked as expected. So, let me know if that's how it's all just a quick short video, but if you want, Patrick, I'd be happy to email you just a little snippet with just this automation and see if that works on your end. Or if you want to send or share a project with me, you could send it to clubcubase at steinberg.de. All right. Okay, and we covered this one already for Andy. All right, so we have a question from Diego who asks, is there a way when changing the workspaces it remembers the track which is in focus and I'm working on? If I'm working and have focus on track 32 and change to another workspace, and now I see track 1 and have to scroll to track 32. Okay, so let's take a look. All right, I have to talk to my son. He's being a little disruptive. All right. He just stepped out. All right. Sorry about that. All right. So let's go ahead and open up a quick project here, and we'll take a look. All right. So I will come over here. Let's look at this particular project. Sorry, my mouse is. All right, I'll try this project here. I'll activate it now. That may help. Okay. All right, so let's say I have my bass track here selected. And I'll just revert this because I probably destroyed it, so we don't have to painstakingly listen to it. Okay, so I have my bass track selected here. All right, so I'm gonna go through different workspaces. So, like I have one that is, we'll call it double supervision. Okay, so we have kind of a large supervision. All right, my bass track is still stored. Let's come to another workspace and we'll call it big mixer. So as I scroll over, my bass track is still selected. So I'm curious. So it seems like the track selection, and I did these, when I did these, I'm not sure if I had tracks that were selected, but all these didn't seem to affect my track selection. So like opening up different workspaces. So let's say I did send, that's still selected. I go to big mixer, my bass track is still selected. I go to start, the same tracks are continually selected. So let me know if there's a particular, maybe if, I'm not sure if saving it with a selected track, or if it's a global workspace or a project workspace. But it seems like the track selection is being kind of maintained as expected on my end here. All right, another question that was mailed in. Hi, Greg. If I move some of my sample folders to another location, when I rescan them in Media Bay in the new location, will all the attributes I've given the sample still be maintained? I'm pretty sure they will, but we'll go ahead and test just to make sure. So let's go back to this folder. All right, and I'm going to create a new audio file. We'll call it attributes. Okay, so I'll go ahead and just record a blank file here. Okay, so now I want to go into my media bay and let's give it some attributes. So this file is going to be on documents, projects, Hangouts, July 18th, 2023. All right, so this is our file name here. So I'm going to go ahead and we'll give it a rating of 5 stars. We'll tell it to follow tempo. Okay, so we've given it some attributes now. So now what I want to do is to take this file and move it to a new location. And we'll see if those attributes, I believe, transfer with the file. So let's come to my Finder. And let's go again to the same. All right, so we have attributes 1. All right. So I'm going to move both these to my desktop. Okay. Now we'll go to Media Bay. And let's look at desktop, and I'll rescan. Excuse me just one second. All right, I'm back. Sorry about that. All right, so let's look for. So rescan the disk here. I think we should. Right, so here's our attribute file, and now we can see that the settings that we had set, our 5 stars and our follow tempo that we set to yes was automatically preserved even though it was put into a different location. So yeah, the metadata will be retained when you move the files to different locations. All right, let's jump back to our live questions. Thanks for sending questions in advance. Again, you could always send questions to clubcubase@steinberg.de. Okay, finding my spot. Okay, so we see from Nungu60A, my playhead got stuck in a position and won't move no matter what. Had to undo to save myself. What could have caused that? So one of the things that may have caused it is if external sync was turned on. So let's say we have our playhead position here. So, we're playing as expected, but if you go to transport and you say activate external sync, and you could also have it activated on the project window. So maybe you had just go to your transport menu and see if activate external sync was checked. And you could, it's one of the things that you could also have set up on your transport. So let's say we go to activate external sync, that you could, have this turned on, and then it could be just waiting for time code to come in before the cursor moves. And then when it sees time code, at that point, the cursor will be able to follow. So maybe external sync got activated. See Michael Team saying howdy to Ryan. So it's my son. He's gonna go see his first rock and roll concert on Thursday night. We're gonna see and go hang out with Mr. Peter Frampton. So looking forward to seeing him in concert. It's a good first concert for Ryan to see. All right, wonderful to see Sable Winters on the live stream. So glad you can make it today. All right, Alessandro Braz asks, what does the transpose track do? All right, so what the transpose track is going to allow us to do is to, transpose all of our tracks globally. So let me just jump to, we'll get to this project here. So I want to basically just add a transpose track onto this. And we could choose tracks to follow the transpose track or not. So I'm going to just right click and let's add track and add transpose. All right, so as we play now, I'm just going to click here with my mouse. Usually the pencil tool allows us to do it, so let's just okay, so now we see a value here. We can say, okay, now as we transpose, or we go back to our original key and we can say -2. back to our original. So at this point, you could just kind of have different tracks automatically transpose. So if you say, okay, I want to come here, just put it into grid mode. Like you say, at this point in the song, I want it to go up a major second. I want it to go back to tonic here. So as we listen to it, so you see this value is set to 2. Now let's say I didn't want the drums to transpose. So what I could do is select all of my drum events here. And where on the info line we will see global transpose. So we'll choose independent. So now when I transpose, the drums won't transpose, but the other tracks will. So when we come up to this transpose here, so just the bass and the guitar parts are transposing. So drums didn't transpose because they're not really, don't really have to in a lot of cases. So we could choose for tracks to transpose or not to transpose. And that's just by going into global transpose settings right here in the info line. All right. All right, so we see that Michael Teams has granted my family and myself a 1 gallon of pineapple swirl ice cream. All right, so I think I'm at the end of questions. Let's see if there's anything else that comes in. If not, we can wrap up a little early. Thank you all for wonderful questions. And there's usually about 30 seconds from when I talk to when you guys hear me. So we'll see if there's okay, so we just see can I somehow fast save contact instrument with selected preset in Media Bay to have a central list of instruments? So I think you can. I don't have an instance of contact, but most times, let's say if I want to add an instrument track, I think I may have like one third-party instrument. Maybe not. So, but what you could try is, let's say if we're in a particular instrument, you know, most instrument companies may have their own architecture for preset management, but if you click here, and you know, if we just kind of click here, we can say, okay, let's load preset. And I think this will work for any particular plugin, but now, you know, if you see like this little load preset area, which is generally, you know, part of Cubase to manage the presets. So we'll come over here, say save, or we'll save the preset, and we'll call this preset test. That then we could access that directly from within Media Bay as well. So now if we go to Media Bay and we'll go, you know, to user content and say we want to go to VST3 presets, you could come over here, and I may have to rescan, but at that point you could just come over here. So you could try, oh, sorry, let me just kill the... So there's our preset test. So, but another thing that you could do is once you have everything kind of set up is just to right click and save a track preset, and you could save a track preset and open that up and have that automatically recalled and addressable directly through Media Bay as well. All right, we'll see there's other questions. We see Greg Malik saying mahalo to everyone. So just out of curiosity, Greg, what island are you on? So, all right, we'll see if there's more questions. Give it another minute or two. All right, so we see Michael Teams just saying, thanks, Greg, learn something new every time. So thanks for being on and for your ice cream distribution. So we will be doing, again, our next live stream on Friday. So the week of, I think, August 7th through the week of August 7th, I'm going to be on vacation. So just a heads up, I'll remind people on it of that as we get closer to that. So we'll be on vacation with my family. So we won't be doing live streams that weekend, and there will be 1 week. I think I'm going to be in Germany in September, so I'll see if I could do some live streams, maybe from the office in Hamburg. We'll see if we can get that to work. But just a heads up on some of the future live stream. All right, so we'll see if there's any more questions. If not, we'll wrap up a little bit early. All right, so I guess we got through all the questions. And again, if you have questions that you want to send in advance, please send them to clubcubase@steinberg.de. We appreciate everyone spending part of your morning, evening, afternoon, middle of the night with us to learn more about Cubase. And I appreciate everyone attending the live streams. And again, we'll give a quick shout out for all the people that make it such a wonderful community. So I see Michael Pierce says streams from Cafe Steinberg would be cool. So yeah, I'll have to see if I could get something set up for one of the while I'm there. I don't have my travel dates yet, but hopefully we do a live stream. That would be fun to do it from the Steinberg office while I'm there. So, but probably means that I'll be working till 11 o'clock on Friday night. So all right, so you see Jazz Dude just wishing me a happy Frampton comes alive. So Peter's always great. So I've seen him like 35 times or so. He's always amazing. So looking forward to it. All right, so with that, we will go ahead and wrap up. See, there's some more comments coming in. All right. All right, so we see it's going to be Daniela's birthday next week, so she won't have time on Friday. So happy birthday early, Daniela. All right, so with that, we will go ahead and wrap up. Thanks, everyone, for the wonderful questions, and we will see everyone back on Friday starting at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time. Thank you very much. Have a great evening, and everyone please stay safe and healthy. Goodbye.